I'm Kevin Davis. Thank you again for joining the show. It's going to be another mini podcast because we have a few that are pushed off for the next few weeks, but no worries. The longer podcasts are coming. But until then, I'm going to do a little bit of my own freewheeling, I guess you could say, and talk about just things that interest me, things that I think maybe people might hopefully be interested also in hearing. And today, I want to start a 3-part mini-series talking about the Code of Chivalry. And this is something that's been close to my heart since I was in high school. And in high school, I remember my last ever report or big report was done on the age of chivalry. I took a lot of time and a lot of effort in putting it together. And I think that one of my teachers had that, the poster board or whatever, still years later. I don't know if she still has it, but sister, maybe you can tell me if you still have that. But it's something that's really close to my heart. And I think that to many people, and maybe even fittingly so at times, it is a little bit cheesy. It sounds a little bit, corny, cheesy. It's kind of cliche that we should be knights in shining armor. And I think that a lot of how the world portrays that and how they want us to see it is that it's kind of this over-the-top style of bravery and being almost ridiculous about it. But when you actually start looking into the code, I think it has a lot of very good points to it. Now, this is not the code of Catholic men. This is something we'll talk about at different points as well, which I think is also very important. The Catholic Church has a very good way of telling us how we should behave. But I think that the Code of Chivalry works very well with that Catholic code, and it's something that I want to talk about in 3 short episodes. And I'm taking this information from a website called The Medieval Life and Times. I will attach that to the show notes, so if anyone wants to read the rest of it. And quoting from this website, they say the Code of Chivalry, and I'm going to go with a code from the Song of Roland. And quoting from the website, a Code of Chivalry was documented in an epic poem called the Song of Roland. The Song of Roland describes the 8th century knights of the Dark Ages and the battles fought by the Emperor Charlemagne. The code has since been described as Charlemagne's Code of Chivalry. The Song of Roland was written between 1098 and 1100 and described the betrayal of Count Roland at the hand of Ganelon. Roland was a loyal defender of his liege lord Charlemagne, and his code of conduct became understood as a Code of Chivalry. The Code of Chivalry, described in the Song of Roland, and an excellent representation of the Knights' Codes of Chivalry, are as follows. And we're going to talk about 5 of those codes. So there are 17 in total described in the Song of Roland. And I want to give just a brief description of what it is, what each point is, and then maybe talk about it a little and how it applies to us today. Now, some are easier than others. Some are, again, a little old-fashioned, maybe don't totally fit into our society today, but we can find other ways to make use of these codes. So the first one in the Code of Chivalry, according to the Song of Roland, is to fear God and maintain his church. So it's a very fitting first code in the Code of Chivalry. And I think it's one that obviously everything else is built off of. If we don't fear God, if we don't maintain his church, then we have nothing. We are nothing. Without God and without the Catholic Church, nothing else matters. Why behave? Why be good to widows or orphans? Or why be good to the poor? Why be honorable if we do not first fear God and maintain his church? That comes before anything else. Before we fix anything else in our lives, before we men try to be these knights, these true knights, in shining or unshining armor, I suppose, we need to first of all fix our souls as best we can, and to realize that if we first fear God and protect his church, then the rest can follow. The number 2 is to serve the liege lord in valor and faith. Now, this is an interesting one because, at least in this poem, Lord is not capitalized. So I think they're talking about maybe the king, the princes, the president, I suppose. And it's something that we're going to talk about in detail in a coming show, I hope next week, about patriotism and nationalism and the goods and bad points thereof. But it can also mean, I think it's possible that the liege lord is also Christ and God. So to serve the liege lord in valor and faith, I think, could mean also to serve God in valor and faith. And I think that this doesn't need a whole lot of description. I think that we need to stand strong in our beliefs and to serve well our proper leaders. Obviously, not if they ask us to do something that is against our faith or morals. Number 3 is to protect the weak and defenseless. Now, this is one that is very fitting, I think, in our times, because the weakest and most defenseless people in our world, in our society, are being killed by the millions. Unborn babies are being slaughtered in the womb every day around the world, and this is something that I think all of us do not fight hard enough against. If we are to be these knights, if we are to be the soldiers of Christ, and even temporal soldiers, how can we stand by and let this happen? How can we just close our mouths and not do anything about this? And the very least we can do is pray that something changes and something is fixed. But I think, as I did another show with 3 girls from Austria, I think it's important that we get involved one way or another. It doesn't have to be with one of these organizations, but if it's getting a group together to go pray in front of an abortion clinic, if it's, I don't know, social media posts, whatever it is, I think it is important that we fight that fight, because they are the weakest and the most defenseless, and no one is standing up for them right now, or very few people. Number 4 is to give succor to the widows and orphans. This is one that's a little harder to put into our times. It's a little hard to imagine how we can help widows and orphans. I guess it's kind of in the same line as the weak and the defenseless, in trying to those who can't care for themselves. And that goes for, obviously, people that we know who don't have enough money, I suppose. I mean, if we know widows and orphans, obviously help to support them. But the whole idea of, if we have, we should help support those who have not. And finally, number 5 is to refrain from the wanton giving of offense. And this is really an important one, I think, especially on social media. And I see this among many very good people I know very well, and people I know would not be offensive to someone if they were face-to-face. And I do see it that they are offensive and don't mind to be so over social media. And I think that's not a good thing. And it's against how we should act and how we should portray ourselves as Catholics. And again, if we want to follow this code of chivalry, if we want to be knights for Christ, then we should always act with charity, even if it's online, even if it's behind a screen, if it's with people you know or don't know. We should be always trying to be polite and not giving offense. If you have an argument, then do so in a way that is charitable and nice and well thought out. Don't get heated, don't get emotional, because even if you do, you'll lose the argument, first of all, and second of all, you'll lose your image. You'll lose that respect that the person might or should have for you, being a Catholic, and that's the most important thing. It's much more important to keep that image of being a good Catholic than it is to win some silly little argument. Even if you think it's not silly, these arguments that you're trying to win, especially over social media, are really small in the grand scheme of things. People are really going to change their minds by how you act, not by what you say, and especially not by what you say on the internet. So keep that in mind. And again, just following this code of chivalry and the first 5 of 17 of the points of this code of chivalry as per the Song of Roland. So I hope a little bit of food for thought there. The first 5 we went through again are to fear God and maintain his church, to serve the liege lord in valor and faith, to protect the weak and defenseless, to give succor to widows and orphans, and to refrain from the wanton giving of offense. Now we'll talk about the next 12 in upcoming mini podcasts. And again, our big podcasts are going to be coming up in the next few days as well. So stay tuned for that. If anyone wants to support this show and wants more content like this, enjoys this content, well, it does take time and effort. So I'm always very happy for any help that you can give. You can support us on Patreon or on PayPal. Those links will be attached to the show notes. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, all for the greater glory of God.